Welcome back to TIG Time. I'm Mr. TIG. Today's session is going to cover 4130 again, but this is part 2. It's got a little more advanced information in it. And we continue to get questions on 4130, so keep those questions coming. We're going to cover a half a dozen issues today in this segment alone. Now, some of the benefits of 4130 Chrome Moly happen to be that 4130 Chrome Moly has higher strength to weight ratio. In other words, rather than buy mild steel tubing, we buy 4130 because it's strong, and it's stronger by about 30%. Now, because it's stronger, we can go thinner wall, which makes it lighter weight. So if we're building structures like bicycles and airframes and things like that, it's a good choice. Now, remember, 4130 is in the in condition when we're building things. They're going to be left as welded. And that really leads into some of the questions that came about over the recent months. Now, one of the questions is, can you gas weld 4130? And the answer is yes, you can. Now, this isn't a gas welding show, but I got started gas welding. It's a great process. TIG welding is faster, it's got more control. But if you still gas weld, it does a great job. Now, in TIG welding, we're going to specify different filler materials, so be very careful to select the right filler material. Now, the next question is, what about the cooling rates? When you finish welding, does it have to cool down to a slow rate? And do you have to preheat, post-heat in a heat treatment? Well, let me answer it this way. There's been a study that was done in the last decade on 4130 tubing and sheet metal. And I want to make that distinction. 120 thousandths wall thickness and less would be identified as tubing. Now, before that study was done, everything was all wrapped up into one, meaning that you had to look at the 4130 procedure, and it may have required a preheat of 300, 400, maybe even 500 degrees. That goes away with tubing. Just remember, 120 thousandths wall thickness or less does not require the preheatment that you normally think you have to have. So today we're going to be welding 1/16 or 0.62 wall thickness, and in later sessions we're going to do as thin as 0.35 wall thickness. So to answer the next question is, what about the weld size? Now, do you have to have an oversized weld to make sure that it's a good weld? And the answer to that is no. I've got a part right here that was TIG welded. Now, the wall thickness of this is 62 thousandths. The fillet size is about maybe 120 thousandths. And that's plenty. In fact, it's oversized. When you evaluate the cross-section of the amount of linear inches of weld, it's more than enough strength. So typically, you don't have to put a second weld pass on. Put the one in, always add filler material. After all these studies were done, there was a number 1 recommended filler, a number 2, and a number 3. Number 1 is a filler called ER80SD2. The number 2 selection is ER70S2, and the number 3 selection is ER70S6. If you're using any one of the 3, you're in great shape. Each of them has just a slight advantage. It's not major, but there is a certain advantage with the ER80SD2. Now, Chrome Moly, we talk about Chrome Moly. 4130 Chrome Moly, it only has 1% chrome in it, and it only has 1/4% moly in it. So sometimes you hear people call it Chrome Moly without the 4130. Okay, now we're going to do a procedure today that you would use on your frame, whatever it is, and we're going to put in 4 tacks on this tubular project. Now, you probably notice I have 2 samples here. I have one that's pre-cleaned and one that's not. If you don't pre-clean, at least wipe it down with acetone or your favorite solvent. I like to use acetone, but you can notice how shiny the one that's been prepped. When you weld this one, you're going to find that it's going to be a clean weld. You're not going to have these little floaties in the puddle. So it doesn't take much. I just have a deburring wheel that I take this off, and literally takes seconds to pre-clean this. So just pre-clean it up about 1/4 of an inch away, and you're going to find good results with it. So The best way to get started is to get started. So I'm going to put all my safety gear in place, and we'll get this thing done. Okay, the neat thing about TIG welding is you can go in any rotation you want. You can go full 360. You can break it up into quadrants. But you don't have to get in any hurry. If you get out of position, you merely stop, reset, and restart. Now, the thing I like about 0.45 diameter is you seem to have better control of the puddle. Almost finished. And just doing the final wraparound. I see the beginning of the weld. I'm overlapping about a 1/16 of an inch, tapering off on the amperage, and I'm done. Now this is a finished weld. You probably noticed the size of the weld. It's about a 1/8 inch fillet, maybe even a little bit less. I use the ER80S D2 filler, DC straight polarity. Got a gas lens. I'm using a 1/16 tungsten, 1/16 diameter, and it's 2% thoriated. Well, thank you for your interest in 4130 Chrome Moly. We're going to do more segments, and the next time we do a segment, it's going to be on site doing full fabrications and weldments. That's it for now. I'm Mr. Tig.